Well, let's get started. And I thought this could be our theme today, the making of Magnus. Because we know a bit about the timeline, right? What you've done, the progression. And our aim tonight is to see what we can learn from you. Like, who is this person in front of us? And how did you go about building this life that we all follow? And so that's kind of the aim. And we're going to look through key moments from your timeline, from your life, and see what we can learn about the different Magnus over the years. And let's see what we can uncover.
Who the fuck is Magnus Walker? Is that the question, basically?
Well, I think we should start out by looking at this young fellow here.
That's actually one of my favorite photos, believe it or not. I'm 15 years old, so that's 1982. And I'm wearing my Levi's sweatshirt and some 501s right there. And I've already got the hair kind of long. That's the beginning of what I would call is this phase of who the fuck is Magnus Walker right here. This is the rock and roll before the sex, drugs, rock and roll.
But let me steer you a little bit.
All right, steer me back to that.
Because we have three things that I want to touch upon from this teenage version of you.
The pre-beard years.
Yes. One is your experience in markets, and you can paint a picture for us growing up in Sheffield, and then wear metal, heavy metal, as it might have been called at that time, and then also this character. Because I think these three elements in this young you is pretty interesting for us to look at.
Yeah, all right, well, it's a great place to start. The pivotal thing about that photo of long-haired me, I left school at 15, and that was my last year at school. That's 1982. So I didn't realize this at the time, growing up as a kid in Sheffield, England, northern working class town. You know, we didn't have fancy cars. They weren't around. That is my uncle who's going to tie into that story. But what I learned later on was my mum's side of the family were market traders. And they sold stuff at markets. Would it be a bit like, let's say, Grand Central Market without the food? You know, and in England, back in the 70s and 80s, everyone went downtown to the market to buy things. You know, that Amazon didn't exist. You didn't click a button and stuff didn't get delivered. You'd go down to the market and you'd buy cutlery and paintbrushes and whatever it was you needed, clothing and shoes and things like that. And my mum's side of the family were market traders, and they literally sold everything from... It was almost like the beginning of the home shopping network, QVC. You know, these guys would be demonstrating these magic paint rolling brushes and systems. You know, it's kind of later on that became the home shopping network, but it was pretty common growing up around that in England. And I didn't realize at the time, but I learned it later on, that I think that is where my entrepreneurial spirit came from. These market traders, sort of were able to communicate. They got the message across pretty quickly. And I didn't know that as a 15-year-old, but the first job I ever got in LA, I'm going to jump forward and come back because it ties into this, was I arrived in 1986, first couple of years, sex, drugs, rock and roll, going to clubs and things. By probably 88, that novelty was wearing off a little bit, and I accidentally fell into a job on the boardwalk in Venice.
And we're going to get into that in detail in a little bit.
Okay.
The whole boardwalk, all that stuff.
So that bit ties into this entrepreneurial spirit. You want me to touch on it now, or you want to come back to it?
I think we'll talk about the California arrival in a little bit.
Okay.
So we're going to keep you in Sheffield.
So we're going to hang in Sheffield. Now, prior to that picture right there, 15-year-old Magnus, I'll get out there's a book over there with some photos of what I did before I started growing my hair long. But if you haven't seen them, as a kid, I got into middle distance cross country running. I was pretty good at it. I became like North England schoolboy champion, and I ran for this club called Hallamshire Harriers when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right up to the age of when I started growing my hair long, which was probably 13, 14, and discovered that in that time period, you could go drinking in England as a 15-year-old if you looked 16, because that was the drinking age. And that was the end of my athletic career. But I do want to talk about the athletic career a little bit, because that 5-year period from, let's say, 9-year-old me to 14-year-old me, I achieved some personal success in a solo sport, which is middle distance cross country running. And this is another element that I didn't learn at the time, but I learned 20 years later. It's kind of like the loneliness of the long distance runner, the lone wolf aspect of what I talk about. And for better or worse, it's a solo sport. And I'm not a team sport player. I didn't play, soccer, rugby, whatever other team sport it may be. I was like, solo sport being running. It could have been chess, but I wasn't smart enough to play chess, so I didn't have the patience. So I realized at an early age, I was pretty motivated to achieve self-set goals, to be the best you could, to put the energy in. I used to run at one point 40 miles a week. I'd be running twice a day. And I ran for this club called the Hallandshire Harriers. And by 1980, there was a star athlete that was a few years ahead of me at this club called Sebastian Coe. And if anyone's a middle distance runner, you might know that name from 40 years ago. Sebastian Coe was the Olympic world record holder. He actually won the gold medal at the 1984 LA Olympics and set numerous middle distance world records at 800 and 1500 meters. And I have a certificate that was signed, and this certificate was dated 1979, so I was 11, and I think I finished second or third. It didn't matter where I finished. I didn't win that race. What mattered on that certificate that I've kept for over 45 years is Sebastian Coe signed his name, and he just said, "Well done." 2 words, "well done." And my dad never really pat me on the back and said, "Well done." That wasn't my upbringing, this warm, supportive, do whatever you want to do, grow your hair long, wear makeup. It was kind of the opposite. So when this idol of mine, Sebastian Coe, and I had a poster of him on the wall and clippings, and I followed his career, and all he said was, "Well done," those 2 little words. But I'm still talking about him 45 years later because it meant something. So that was the beginning of me finding something that I enjoyed doing, that I could do to the best of my ability, basically for myself. I wasn't really looking to please anyone other than it was something I liked to do. And that I found later on in life is probably the hardest thing, is to find something you like to do. But once you've found something you like to do, and I'm still doing it today, you put all the time in the world in to achieve that personal goal that you set.
So we know that you're comfortable talking to the general public. You're kind of scrappy, right? Being in those markets, talking away. And we know that you can set goals and you've got the discipline to see them through. So we can start seeing the formation of this maybe willful person.
Yeah, stubborn,
but
single-minded.
let's now look into the music direction. You discover hard rock, heavy metal. Talk us through that door opening.
So I think any kid growing up in England in the late 70s, I was just a little too young to remember punk. Punk was sort of 75, 6, 7, and then it was kind of sort of done really. Well, Sex Pistols, it was done. So I don't really remember punk, but I remember bands like Saxon and Motorhead and Thin Lizzy. And I think any kid growing up anywhere in the early 80s in England, there were 3 or 4 main separate of pop musical genres. And it was either heavy metal, hard rock, it was mod, which would be bands like Madness, Selector Specials, Bad Manners, The Jam. The Jam was like the crossover, a little punky but more sort of mod based on The Who and things like that. Or it was new wave bands. It was bands like Sheffield was kind of fortunate because even though I wasn't a fan of Human League, Cabaret Voltaire, Heaven 17, ABC, these were local bands that you'd see on Top of the Pops. MTV didn't exist. Top of the Pops was 7:30 on a Thursday night. And times then were different. Cell phones didn't exist, so you would go every week and get things like Melody Maker, NME, or the Kerrang Rock magazine, and then you'd watch Top of the Pops or Old Grey Whistle Test or whatever else it may be. So it's kind of like you're either a mod or a rocker. You might have been a punk, but I sort of fell into the, I suppose, aggressive heavy metal music, which, looking back again, is kind of an outlaw thing. It's kind of, in a way it was normal, but in a way it wasn't normal. It was kind of rebelling against whatever was happening at that time. And at that time in the early 80s, England wasn't in a great place. Sheffield, which was a northern steel town, certainly wasn't in a great place. The steel industry was sort of dying. Places were closing. Unemployment was rising. But if you grow up in that environment, you don't really know anything different. For me, it was like I'd go see all of these bands at the Sheffield City Hall for like £3.50 and have a great time, and I started seeing bands in 1982, and I saw bands all the way up until when I left Sheffield in 86 and went to this thing here, the Monsters of Rock, in 1984. And 20 years later, I actually got this signed by Van Halen, who ended up at my warehouse, and Motley Crue.
Donington Park, huh?
Donington Park, right there. So that, as a kid, that's just what I was into, and that sort of, I think, is the root of who I am today. It developed at an early age, this sort of rebellious, I don't like being told what to do, it's left school at 15, never had a proper job.
So we're painting a picture here.
Yeah.
So we see these elements that they're not obvious, right? Running, athletics, discipline.
The running bit catches
willful.
people out.
Yeah, that catches people out.
They don't expect that. I suppose, they could see the metal music end of it because, that's not really that different.
And then we've got this natural entrepreneurial, being around that spirit. But then we've got this uncle that you were telling me about. And
Uncle
I think
David.
this is interesting to touch upon.
My Uncle David. So my mum's sister, Susan, younger sister, she married this guy called David Woodhouse. And he was actually a graphic designer. My dad was a salesman, actually selling auto parts and stuff like that. So he was mechanical. David was artistic. And you got to remember, my dad and my mum, they were born in the 40s, growing up in the 60s. It was a whole revolution of music, from, I guess, skiffle, Elvis, Bill Haley and the Comets, leading into Buddy Holly, leading into, obviously, Beatles, Rolling Stones, and everything else. So, everyone hung out at these dances. My mum's sister, Susan, starts dating this guy called David. This is all before I was born, so I don't know these stories, but David was pretty successful, and he was the cool uncle. My other uncle, Mick, had the market stall, and Uncle David had a graphic design business, and we knew he was cool because he had some Levi's, and he wore Converse, and he was like the cool uncle. He had one of those fancy Rolex watches, and my dad was into watches, but it wasn't Rolex and Omega things. It was way more eclectic.
And he was a car person, right?
Yeah, well, so here's the story. My Uncle David had the funds to buy a car. My dad had the sort of mechanical engineering background to sort of work on the car. And my Uncle David my Uncle David bought a Lotus 47 in kit form from Lotus, which you could do back then. And if you don't know what a Lotus 47 is, it's a Europa on steroids. He made very few of them, and it's a very cool car. And my Uncle David bought it sort of in kit form like you would do from IKEA, and they built it in my Uncle David's garage, and my dad helped him build it. And that was their sort of first foray into cool cars. That was then superseded by a 1973 Ferrari 246 Dino, which my Uncle David then traded into a 1975 fiberglass Ferrari 308 GTB. So we were around cool cars, but we didn't own cool cars, and cool cars weren't a common sight in Sheffield. It was kind of a rarity, and you had to be sort of wealthy, and you had to be clued in. On my side of the family, my dad would take myself and my brother St. John to club races at tracks such as Donington Park, Cadwell Park, Alton Park, Mallory Park. We never went to Formula One. We couldn't afford that. But we watched Formula One on TV. Grandstand was every Saturday and Sunday. Murray Walker commentated. And by 1976, I'm 9 years old. And James Hunt's Formula One world champion beat Niki Lauda in 76. And Barry Sheen's two-wheel superbike champion. So England was and probably still is the epicenter of motorsports and F1. So being around that culture, it was, my dad got the Autosport magazine, so we were just aware of it, which does lead into the story here. I don't know when you want to tell that, but that's 10-year-old me. That timeline fits in. But that's the story with me as a headbanger.
Let's touch upon that,
okay.
But I don't want to dwell on it too long, because I want to get to the U.S. soon.
We'll spend 30 seconds on this tired old story. 10-year-old me goes to London Olds Court Motor Show in 1977, and that's where I fell in love with Porsche. I'd seen Porsche before in magazines, but I literally came back from that trade show when I was 10 years old, having seen that car on display with a program, and I wrote a letter to Porsche saying, hey, I want to design cars for you, and they wrote me a letter back, essentially saying, call us when you're older. So that's it. 60 seconds on that, we'll move on. I've told that story a lot.
Well, let's get over to Hollywood. We
go.
can breeze through Detroit, then we get on the bus. And then I want you to really tell us about this, because to me that's really interesting. And this also shows a bit more of that entrepreneurial you that we learned about before.
Let me back up if I can take a liberty and go 60 seconds before that. I left school at 15, bummed around on the dole, never had a job, worked as a laborer, 16, 17, still going out, growing my hair long. Now I'm merging into my let's call it Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, Poison, spiky bleach blonde hair, wearing a bit of makeup, feeling real glam. Maybe you got one of those photos. So that's me at 85, 80. By 86, I decided, hey, being on the dole kind of sucks. Living with my mum and dad, this is really not good as a 16, 17-year-old. It's not cool. So I went to college and I did this thing called the City and Guilds Leisure and Recreation Study. And it was kind of a way, to sort of use my athletic ability and try and find some direction in sports management or coaching or whatever it may be. But what really clicked was I found out about this thing called Camp America. And Camp America is a way to bring students over from England to work on summer camps in America. Summer camps don't exist in England, or they didn't 40 years ago. I wasn't even in the Scouts or the Cubs or anything. So it was all alien and foreign to me, but I ended up applying and getting accepted and worked on a summer camp north of Detroit on Lake Michigan for inner city underprivileged kids. So I arrived looking like I want to be in Poison, and I'm on summer camp in the middle of nowhere, and everyone's listening to Run DMC, LL Cool J, and it's hip hop. So I kind of was like a fish out of water in that environment, which is where I describe how I learned to become an adaptive swimmer. And by that I meant I just had to adapt to that environment, which was out of my comfort zone. So I spent the summer in Detroit on that summer camp, which was a little bit like Sheffield. Detroit in the 86 was kind of a really cool place. Vibrant music scene, rundown city, slightly decaying. I took a Trailways bus from Detroit to LA, and arrived at Union Station on a Tuesday morning at 4 a.m. And Union Station at 4 a.m. in the morning in 1986 wasn't like the LA I'd seen on TV. It wasn't like full of beautiful people and movie stars and rock stars. It was like, we're all the cool people, because they're not at Union Station getting off a Trailways or a Greyhound bus at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday. And my cousin Oliver came with me, joined me in Detroit. We took the bus from Detroit to LA. And then we got on a bus from somewhere in downtown, which wasn't Union Station. We had to walk with a big backpack, like sort of down a Broadway in 9th, 7th, whatever it was, and took a bus to Hollywood Boulevard. And we stayed at the YMCA for 5 nights just off of Hollywood Boulevard, one block west of Cahuenga. And that YMCA is still there. Ironically, I still drive by it, and it kind of feels grounding because 40 years later, I'm still kind of in that vicinity. Anyway, I arrive, Hollywood Boulevard, I go shopping, I've got my spiky hair on, and I walk into this store on Hollywood Boulevard. And what I love about Hollywood Boulevard, other than Hollywood and Highland, it has not changed in 40 years. It's still full of cool, shitty, crappy mom and pop stores. It's still full of people coming there, getting off the bus like I did, trying to fulfill their dream. You drive past Grauman's Chinese Theater, it's comical, but I love it. And I went in this store, and there were these black snakeskin pants for sale for $9.99. And I bought a pair because they looked really cool. And I went back to the YMCA hotel. They didn't quite fit right. So somehow I had a sewing kit with me. And this is a pivotal part to the story that we'll touch on, I guess, in a bit. My mum had taught me how to sew. And that was really just meaning making my Levi jeans as tight as possible and sewing patches on things like that jacket right there. And so I went back to the room and actually made the pants really skin tight, and then decided to walk from basically Hollywood Boulevard and Cahuenga down to Melrose. And it's a straight line on a map down to Melrose, and cell phones don't exist. And someone told me, oh, Melrose, that's where all the cool stars are, like Kings Road or Camden Market or Covent Garden or Carnaby Street. Well, if you walk all the way down Cahuenga to Melrose and turn right, that's not actually where the cool stars are. You got to walk another mile further west and get to La Brea. So we arrived there. And you got to remember, this is first week of September. So it's pretty hot. I'm dressed in black PVC. I've got my spiky hair on. I'm looking all glammed up, trying to fall in with the cool kids. And I walk into this store called Retail Slut. And there's this guy behind the counter called Tammy Down, and he's a singer of this band called Fasty Pussycat that are actually a pretty successful band. They're not quite at the Guns N' Roses level, but they're like one step behind them. And for some reason, Tammy and I, we kind of look similar, spiky blonde hair. He just looked at me, and we striked up a conversation, and within 30 seconds he goes, hey, you look cool, where'd you get those pants from? And I hadn't even thought about this, but somehow a spark entered my head, and I go, London, why, do you want to buy them? And he goes, sure, how much are they? And I remember I just bought them for $9.99 on Hollywood Boulevard. So the first figure that pops into my mind is $25. I go, how many do you want? He goes, I want 8 pairs, 130, 232s, 234s, and a 36. I didn't even have the money to buy them. My cousin Oliver actually loaned me a couple of $100. This time we actually took a cab because we want to get him there quick before he changes his mind and realize we just bought him for $10. So we go up to Hollywood Boulevard, buy 12 pairs. We don't even take them in. Straight back down to retail slut, hand over the 8 pairs. He gives his $200 cash because, everyone was about cash then. And that was it. I thought, wow, maybe LA is going to be a place that might work out for me. I didn't realize at the time, connecting those dots, that was probably the market trading side, the entrepreneurial side that came from my mum and those market vendors that sensed an opportunity. I didn't even see it. I sensed it. It wasn't like, what's wrong with these guys? Like, I know Hollywood Boulevard's not cool, but yet people from Melrose don't go up to Hollywood Boulevard and save $15. I mean, Tammy was selling those pants for 50 or 60, so it didn't really matter. But it wasn't like I thought, let me go try and sell these pants. It was a sense that just came, a spark in that moment. It wasn't premeditated on, here's a blueprint of, where do you want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. I don't really know where I'm going to be next week. I mean, I do, but I don't. But I certainly didn't know then. It was irrelevant. So that is the Take Me Down Retail Slut $9.99.
And I view that a bit as one of those lean-in moments where you had the courage in order to get on this plane, just arrive, take buses, and suddenly you find yourself not that long later in Los Angeles, and then a few days later, this doorway just appears, right? Cracks open, and you walk straight through it, because that leads us into this next phase of what's happening on the boardwalk. And you can start telling the story of Sirius and all that here.
Yeah.
I also remember you telling us about how you had to get rides from people. We thought that was really funny. And also the Toyota. We want to hear about the Toyota.
Sure. We can talk about all that. So I left England at the age of 19. To finish the England story, I never had a car in England, never had a driver's license. All my adult responsibility happened here in LA. By that I mean, never had a job there, never had my own apartment, lived with my mum and dad. So I've been here a couple of years. By 87, 88, the novelty of couch surfing and living on 25-cent frozen burritos and waiting for people to come and pick me up to take me to clubs. I had freedom, but I was lacking a little bit of independence because I was relying on other people to get me around. So I don't quite know how I ended up in Venice, but a lot of British people do, and Venice is cool and was cool, and we all like it down there. And I was walking down the boardwalk, I guess looking what I thought was cool, and walking past vendors selling stuff. And Venice back then was crystals and Grateful Dead and cheap sunglasses and artists making stuff on one side, the ocean side, and then the other side was all the cheap sunglasses and 3 socks for $5 type of thing. Anyway, this guy must have heard me talking. It was an English guy. He goes, hey, are you English? I go, yeah. He goes, do you want a job? I go, doing what? He goes, hawking. I go, hawking? He goes, yeah, just stand in front of the booth and tell people, step right up, don't be shy, come on in, 1 for 5, 2 for 10, 4 for 20 type of thing. And I go, what's it pay? He goes, $10 a day. I go, sure. I go, how many days? He goes, Saturday, Sunday. So, okay, I started. That was the first job I had, paying me $10 a day, which, was better than nothing. And I started selling seconds from the Gap. This guy was literally selling seconds from the Gap clothing store. So it wasn't anything I was into, but it was the entrepreneurial side of, I was the guy standing out in front, encouraging people to come in and get the deal. I didn't have the sandwich barrier. I wasn't twirling that around, but it was kind of the same type of thing. And then I started sort of doing the same thing, and I noticed around that I saw these cool old hippies selling secondhand clothing, vintage cowboy boots, motorcycle jackets, dresses, and jeans. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of what I'm into. So that was the seed of what led into what became Venetian Paradise. And what Venetian Paradise is the evolution of this. So what I would do is I would go to yard sales, Salvation Armies, flea markets, and buy old Levi 501s for anywhere from 50 cents to $1 to $2.50. And then I would buy old vintage sort of floral shirts and dresses, and I started cutting them up and sewing patches on the jeans. And I was coming at it from this sort of hippie, rock and roll-y, Led Zeppelin-y, Grateful Dead-y, Black Crowes vibe. And I remember I made 5 pairs. I was with someone who had a sewing machine. We'd cut them up, pin them on, and take them down the boardwalk, and we'd sell them for $10, $20, $25. And little by little, pretty quickly, I think we did $50 our first day, $75 the second, but before you know it, we were doing a couple of $100 a day. And then I noticed these guys were selling these Guatemalan hats, like these little painter beret hats. So I bought one and thought, well, I don't really like the Guatemalan stripe, but I bet I could make one of these out of this old velvet dress. So I literally took it apart. It was a big circle, pleated into a straight band. I took it apart, ironed it out flat, traced around it in velvet. And these guys didn't line their hats. I thought, wouldn't this be cool if I put this paisley fabric on the inside so it became reversible? And no one was making reversible hats at the time. It's like 1989, 1990. So we started selling these reversible hats. And then something strange happened. Yet again, timing and unpredictability. The rave culture thing really, really took off in Venice and downtown. And I remember one time this hippie came up to me and said, "Can you make a Cat in the Hat hat?" And I go, "What's a Cat in the Hat hat?" And they said, "Oh, it's a stripy thing with a couple of stripes on it." And so later on that week, I sort of figured out how to make a Cat in the Hat hat, and then I figured out how to make a Mad Hatter top hat, and all these wacky sort of whimsical hats that tied into this rock and roll vibe, but also crossed over into this rave culture, baggy acid house thing. And all of a sudden, we couldn't make these hats quick enough. And then someone said, "You should try wholesaling these." I go, "What's wholesale?" And they go, "Go down to Melrose." So made up a bag of shit, took it down to Melrose, and walked into this store called Wacko Soap Plant, Billy Shire. And we basically said, "Hey, can we speak to the buyer? There's a bunch of patchwork Levi's and a bunch of hats." And they basically just picked them out on the floor and I think placed an order and for like $1,000. And that was it. We were wholesaling. And then someone said, "You should do a trade show." We go, "What's a trade show?" They go, "That's where all the big retailers go." I go, "Where do trade shows happen?" They go, "New York." And by now, this is like 1990. So we're starting to make cash on the boardwalk in Venice, enough where we can take ourselves to New York, get a booth. And the very first trade show we ever did was at the Javits Center in 1990. And we got an order from Disneyland for 144 of 12 different styles of hats. And then within 3 months, we were selling those same hats to Six Flags Magic Mountain and Universal Studios. And
then you bought a car.
Well, the car was before then. I can back up to in 1988, when I was 21 years old, with some of the early successes selling stuff on the boardwalk in Venice, I bought my very first car, which was a 1977 white Toyota Corolla 2TC for $200.
Amazing.
And I didn't even have a driver's license. But that didn't matter. I didn't care. I drove it around without a driver's license. And then when I was 21, so I guess I got it maybe when I was 20. When I was 21, I took my driver's test in that car at the Santa Monica DMV on Colorado and Cloverfield. So that was my very first car. And what that represented was freedom. Because before that, I'm driving around, I'm hitching rides and waiting for people to come and pick me up. That right there is the Weenie Roast. That's a little bit later. If you guys remember the K-Rock Weenie Roast, that's circa, 94, 95. Pre-beard days.
Well, tell us about Sirius now and how that started to grow out of this phase of your life.
So Venetian Paradise was patchwork jeans and floppy hats, and we're wholesaling everyone from Disneyland. And 1991, we ended up selling to a little store called Hot Topic that had 5 stores. Anybody know Hot Topic? So Hot Topic ended up growing to like 600-700 stores, and we grew with them. Now, we were having great success for a couple of years. And then the big evil Garmentos realized these little hippies in Venice are doing this cool stuff that we can knock off and go make in China for a fraction of the price. So what we were selling, let's say, for $22.50 wholesale, all of a sudden, Disneyland wanted to buy for $7 because, someone had knocked it off in China. It wasn't quite the same, and it wasn't reversible. It didn't matter. It looked pretty similar. So we essentially became old hat. And at the time, we'd been selling like a bunch of hip-hop people. It's sort of gone from rock and roll to acid house, rave, to hip-hop, like Flavor Flav, and all these guys wearing big, crazy hats, and they were buying quite a lot of the hats either from us or stores that we sold to. And one of these rappers, we were showing him some velvet stuff that we were making. It wasn't patchwork, it was cut and sew. And he literally said, whoa, that's some dope shit. That shit's serious. And I went, serious, name change. And that was it. That was the birth of Serious. We just needed to rebrand and separate from Venetian Paradise, which was simply my slice of paradise living in Venice, hence Venetian Paradise. So in 1994, we sort of rebranded, stopped doing the hats, stopped doing the patchwork jeans, because at this point, I couldn't buy enough of them cheap enough, and they were becoming more expensive. And yet again, that trend had sort of petered out, or people had knocked it off and made it cheaper. So the key here is...
This chapter to me is quite interesting because you have Serious going on, but also your Porsche life is starting.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it'd be interesting for you to start introducing when the Porsche, we're not allowed to say Porsches, right? Porsche cars?
You can call it whatever you want, they're all Beatles.
Porsche people say you're not supposed, there's no such thing as a plural.
Yeah, you got to be careful of
anyway,
Porsche people, let me tell you.
Yes, Porsche life and then DTLA, right?
Yeah.
And the space.
Got it.
Because when the film came out, you'd been doing that for some time. It was formed. But for me, what's very interesting is when you were just doing it for yourself. There were no cameras, there was no following. You were developing this life for yourself. And I'd love to you to paint a picture of this phase in your life.
Yeah, this space is very creative for me. In 1994, I'm 27 years old. So I've gone from the boardwalk in Venice. You know, I've gone from sewing jeans in a little apartment on the corner of San Juan and Riviera in Venice, right off of Abbot Kinney. And ironically, that building was magical because the bass player, Eric Avery from Jane's Addiction, lived in the building, and Rosanna Arquette's dad lived in the building. It was this creative, wacky space, and Venice was super cool. So I'd gone from the apartment to a garage to a warehouse on Boccasio opposite this company called Bronze Age, which later on became Von Dutch. And if you're familiar with Venice or you're interested in it, check out the Venetian history because it's really cool. There's so much cool creative stuff going on there. And it was a self-expression of, I'd found something I like to do, like running. And I'd found something that I was actually relatively good at with no experience. Remember, I left school at 15 with 2 O-levels. I didn't go to fashion school. I didn't go to design school. I didn't go to business school. This was just organic stuff that sort of made me feel good. And sewing became a business that became pretty profitable to the point where in 1992, I actually moved downtown. It became more and more difficult and time-consuming going backwards and forwards from Venice to downtown. And the bigger the company got, the more cuts we were doing, the more fabric. And the whole garment center is based in downtown LA. And people didn't want to drive out to Venice to pick stuff up and drop stuff off. So it just made more sense to move downtown, and I rented a loft on 7th Place, which is opposite now what's Best here, 7th and Santa Fe. So I've been downtown in the Arts District since 1992. That's 35 years. And it's just a cool environment. And so to answer your question, yet again, it was a bit like the running. Something I was very passionate about that organically evolved through trial and error that became successful. And we were sort of making a scene. There were 2 other companies that were doing what we were doing. One was Trip, based out of New York, and the other was Lip Service, based here in LA. And then various other people. But we were sort of the 3 pioneers of that reinterpretation of glam rock. But everything was around. It was Guns N' Roses, which then merged into grunge and everything else in between, and dysfunctional punk rock kids and rock and roll kids, and just a never-ending audience of consumers wanting to look cool and go to clubs. And I'm in my late 20s, 27 years old at this point, and things are just rolling naturally. And, you know, nothing was too hard to figure out. And looking back now, you know, we've all got cell phones and the web and internet and all this stuff, and things should be easier. But in reality, it seemed easier then because we were supplying literally Alice Cooper to Madonna and stylists and music videos, and we were on the cover of Rolling Stone with belly-wearing outfits and in tons of magazines, whether it was Sportswear Illustrated or Women's Wear Daily or Apparel News or 17 or whatever it was. So later on, when the whole car thing exploded, I had already had a taste of that at least a decade before, maybe 20 years before that. So it just sort of came naturally, and it was all about expression of designing things we personally wanted to wear. I'm still doing the same thing with cars, designing shit that I personally like. Whether you like it or not was kind of irrelevant. We weren't following trends of, fast disposable fashion of, okay, tight jeans are in, so we got to wear tight jeans. Now it's baggy, now it's low rise, now it's flared, whatever. We were just designing stuff we personally like to wear, going out a lot to the clubs, meeting a lot of people. And it was just a cool scene, seeing all the bands, seeing Ozfest. I mean, ironically, just 2 days ago, Hannah pulls out this jacket that I've had since 1997. And it's an old Alice Cooper jacket that Alice Cooper actually wore and gave to me. By like 95, 96, 97, we're doing stuff for Alice Cooper. Later on, I'm going on tour with Alice Cooper. And it just happened organically with no publicist, no agent, no PR, no internet. It was just creative people doing creative things in a network that understood that. Stylists would come down and pull wardrobe. Being in LA helped. Having a store on Melrose helped, because every band that ever came through LA with a little bit of time off was killing time on Melrose. And one thing just led to the other very, very organically.
Well, talk us through the injection of cars into this world, the warehouse, DTLA, because we know you bought the building and we know you're operating Sirius out of there. But I'm very interested to see that early spark of the first 911s entering your life, and you expressing yourself with those cars.
Got it. So first car I buy, $200 Toyota, 1988. Second car I buy, Saab 900 SPG Turbo. That was 1990. That was like the yuppie West Side. You're an architect, you drive a Saab, right? But I kind of liked it for some reason. But the most important car was the third car that I bought, and it was my first Porsche. And I bought it at the Pomona Swap Meet in 1992 for $7,500. And it represented a personal sense of personal achievement and a dream come true. And it was a red 1974 slant nose 935 wide body conversion minus the turbo motor. And that to me was like, the Saab was cool, but I'd never dreamt about a Saab. I didn't have a poster of a Saab on the wall. I mean, I know some people do, and they're cool cars, and I kind of want another one, but it wasn't a Porsche. So I remember 10-year-old me, 15 years before, literally, wrote the letter to Porsche. When I was 25, I bought my first Porsche in 1992 with my own money. It wasn't from my mom, my dad. It was money that I'd made selling shit on the boardwalk in Venice. So that just represented personal sense of achievement of, I never thought I would own one.
And did you start styling and customizing them right away and putting your aesthetic into it?
Yeah, no. The interesting thing about the 74 slant nose was it was already modified. Someone had taken a basic G-bodied car and made it look like a slant nose kind. You know what a slant nose looks like. You got one. So it was already modified. It already had been tweaked. So I just like, slant nose is one of those 911s that you either love them or you hate them. It's a full-on Miami Vice thing. Now they're finally getting appreciated. Gambalas and DPs and Koenigsegg's and Kramers and, of course, factory slant nose 935s. But back then it was just backyard builders, shop world. It's late 80s, early 90s. For me, it was interesting that the first Porsche I bought and owned wasn't a numbers matching all original Porsche. It was a modified Porsche. And the second car I bought was the car that became 277, second Porsche. And I bought that in 1999. But in between those two cars, there were a lot of other non-Porsches. American muscle cars. At one time, I had a 65 GT 350R replica Mustang with a 351 Cleveland, Richmond 5-speed Detroit locker. I had a 67 E-Type Jag. I had two 69 Super Bs, a 73 Lotus Chiropa, and a 79 308 GTB Ferrari, and a couple of Porsches. That was the 90s. So it was variety. Yet again, pre-internet, you'd go out and get the sports car trader on a Wednesday night before it came out on a Thursday morning at midnight after you come out of the club on Santa Monica Boulevard on the way home, and you go start looking through cars on the sports car trader or recycler or the world's greatest place, Pomona Swap Meet. And I would just, this time, I'm picking these cars up inexpensively. $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, never more than $10,000. So I was just acquiring things I was interested in and personally wanted to own. And I'm still that way. It's never like what car's going to make money, what car's going to double, triple, and double again. A lot of these cars did, but I was acquiring them when they were affordable. And you got to remember, LA is and still is car culture capital of the world. You know, there are so many cool cars out here, but back then they were just really obtainable and easy to find.
Well, what was driving you to continue buying these cars and start collecting? What was the spark there?
One was never enough in variety. You know, I watched a lot of American TV growing up, so it was all based around cars. Dukes of Hazzard, Starsky and Hutch, Kojak, Rockford Files, you know. Starsky and Hutch, they've got, you know, the Ford Torino, Dukes of Hazzard, the Charger, Rockford Files, the Camaro, and just a whole bunch of other American shows that revolved around cars. So that was what brought me originally to LA. You know, it was American music, great weather, sex, drugs, rock and roll, car culture. So when I could afford cars, you know, it was just experiencing variety. I was always into Porsche, but like right now we're in our vintage Rolls-Royce phase, for example, because it represents such great value and we're just drawn to the aesthetics. Each one of those cars was something I was into, quirky. You know, whether it was a Saab or a Lotus Europa, you know, maybe some of them were like childhood memories, but it just happened organically. It wasn't a plan to, okay, I want to own this and this. It was like you'd see something, you go, wow, that's cool. And one Super B became two Super Bs, and it was just an evolution. But little by little, by the time 2000 rolled around and I bought the building in the Arts District, instead of renting a warehouse and a loft for 6 years, I finally realized, hey, we should be owning our own building, and ended up buying that space, which then got me into the film location business, which really sort of skyrocketed the availability of funds to go purchase other cars. And that was when I started letting go of most of the non-Porsches. Like all of those cars were great at one thing. Like the Super B was fun in a straight line, but didn't go around corners and didn't stop. You know, the E-Type Jag looked cool, but it was always prone to being unreliable. Lotus Europa was super nimble but underpowered. The Ferrari was clickety-click but didn't sort of have the same visceral feeling as the 911. So I just started letting most non-911s go, and then I joined the Porsche Owners Club in 2002. Well, that was when I took my what I would call aggressive street driving to the track, and over the next 6 years, from 2002 to 2008, probably did at least 30 or 40 track days a year at tracks such as Willow Springs, Laguna Seca, Phoenix, Vegas, California Speedway. And I went through their short track program, time trial program, then became club race license, did wheel to wheel, started instructing, and sort of just became more of a refined driver. And that was sort of leading up to, if you looked over there in that corner, 2002 to 2008.
So I'd like to jump ahead now to 2011, and the Urban Outlaw film comes out. And I've put this up to prompt you, because it appeared that you just dropped into the automotive world out of nowhere, seemingly. You were suddenly on the world stage.
Yeah.
Even the trailer that we played earlier, that was from the Porsche official YouTube channel where we found it. And but I'd like you just to look backwards now and give your thoughts of that moment where this film comes out, because we know that everything that you had done before that was decades in the making, and just to see what your thoughts are now looking back at that film.
Great question. Well, the evolution of, I guess, the revolution, Urban Outlaw came out in 2012, but I'm going to go back a couple of years and then come into that. So around 2008, I was sort of losing interest in doing a lot of track days. The more competitive that became, the more time-consuming it became, the more expensive it became, the less fun it became. And I'd done 6 years of quite a lot of track stuff and, you know, going away, and I just wasn't enjoying as much. And all that time, energy, and money that I'd spent racing, I thought, fuck, let me start doing my next phase, which I wanted to build cars. So I started buying inexpensive 911s around 2008, 2009, air-cooled stuff, and building what would be known as sport-purpose, streetable, R-inspired, lightweight, streetable track canyon carver cars. And that was probably 2009, 10, up to 11. You guys dug out that Pelican Parts forum, the early S Registry forum. All of that momentum led up to an email from this crazy Canadian film director called Tamir Moscovici, who was a commercial film director. He was a Porsche owner, and he'd been following my thread on Pelican Parts on the blog, and I was just starting to get some coverage in European magazines like Total 911, Porsche World. This is 2011. And Tamir sends me an email and says, hey, I think there's more to your story than you're telling. How do you feel about making a film? Now, by this point, I'd been in the film location industry, renting out the building that I bought in the Arts District in 2010. And by that, I mean we'd rent it out for commercials, TV shows, reality shows, American Idol, America's Next Top Model. And we're filming about 100 days a year, which if you're in the film business, that's quite a lot of days. And that was really what enabled me to buy these cars. So I'd been around filming, and people had said to me, hey, do you want to film some stuff? And nothing ever clicked. I'd never been in front of the camera. You know, I just was doing shit for myself, didn't document it, didn't own a cell phone, wasn't on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, wasn't even on it, no interest. But I got this email from Tamir, and somehow it clicked and resonated with him, and he was looking to make a short 2 to 3 minute YouTube film. And he ended up flying down on frequent flyer miles from Toronto, hired a ramshackle bunch of out-of-work, great, talented shooters, and we shot over 4 days in February of 2012 what would become this 32-minute short documentary award-winning film called Urban Outlaw. And the only reason we called it Urban Outlaw was the year before there was an article in the British Porsche magazine called Total 911, and they called the article Urban Outlaw. I'm living in an urban environment in downtown LA, building what people would term outlaw modified 911s. And there's nothing new about that. People have been modifying Porsches since the James Dean days, you know, and Porsches are easy to modify. But the only difference with my story was I was building for myself. It wasn't a business. I wasn't, you know, looking to really do anything other than create these things for myself. Plus, looking a little bit different and not looking like your typical Porsche guy with a polo shirt on with his little PCA badge that says, you know, whatever his name is, right? And those guys are Zone 8 Region San Diego PCA Bob, and he's going to tell you everything that's right and wrong about your Porsche down on the wrong shade of cat plate and blah, blah, blah. And I was the opposite. So, you know, I'm the rock and roll Porsche guy. But it came down to timing. For some reason with Tamir, I'm like, fuck, how bad can this be? Sure. I'd never met him till the day we started filming. And he turned up on a Thursday morning. We shot Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I kind of clicked with him, but day 1 and 2, we're not even driving. I remember on Saturday, I kind of got in a little tiff with him. I'm like, when are we going to drive? I thought we were going to be doing some cool driving stuff. You know, I just wanted to rip around downtown LA and have someone film it. And I didn't realize he was a filmmaker making a story with a script and a treatment. You know, I'd never done any filming. So, you know, we got on pretty well, and then he disappeared, and then he put out that trailer that you saw in June of 2012. It got picked up by something called Top Gear and then kind of went viral, and one of the guys that was working for me at the time said, hey, you should probably get on this thing called Facebook. So I got on this thing called Facebook, and within a couple of days, it had gone from 50 followers to 5,000, and then just kind of sort of kept exploding. But an interesting thing happened there. We got all this momentum around this trailer for the film. You got to remember, 2012, I don't think Petrolicious existed, and created content wasn't the same as it is today. iPhones weren't really out, and it wasn't as easy to shoot stuff and get it up there. And this film was only shot on 2 Canon 5Ds, but there was a lot of anticipation for it, to the point of, I got another email after the trailer came out from this guy called Sandy Bodecker, who was the president of Nike SB, kind of a big deal at Nike. And I go, where's the connection? And he asked if, you know, he could bring down his design team and host a little 2-day design summit at my warehouse, and could he screen Urban Outlaw? And I go, well, we haven't even finished it. I guess so. We got a rough cut. We got to talk to Tamir, crazy guy in Toronto. He ended up flying down, and we screened a rough cut of Urban Outlaw to Nike, to no one else, like 30 people in Nike's think tank, where they had these annual meetings of design. And I'm like, where's the connection? And it just was like, you know, Nike was formed in a backyard by Phil Knight with a waffle, and it was Shoe Dog, and that was it. It was just me dicking around with a piece of leather. And either they had a lot of time and money to waste, maybe, or maybe they saw a little spark of creativity that might be not teachable, but just inspirational. So we thought, wow, someone at Nike's sort of picked up on this. There's something sort of happening here. And then that film debuted at the London Raindance Film Festival, which is a rainy version of Sundance, in October in 2012. And then the next year, Porsche starts calling, and a lot of other people start calling, and I start traveling the world. That's long story short.
And this brings me to close to the end of my time with you, because Andrew
I feel like we're just getting started here. Come on, we got all night.
Well, we're going to tell much more of your story through the cars, because we're going to start going around and looking at the cars together. But I'm always trying to dissect why and how is it that people that find their way in creative fields and are able to take the images in their mind's eye and manifest it in their lives, what are the common elements? And when I look at your life, I see many moments where you're in the right time, right place at the right time, right? You come to Los Angeles, someone that likes design, someone that likes heavy metal, right when hair metal is going, right? You arrived at that,
Correct.
and you were into it, and then you got swept into this cultural wave, and you're able to go with it. And then DTLA, Arts District, we know what it is now, but you came in there, you bought a building, and you started building this life there right at the exact right moment. And then things moved along, right? And then air-cooled Porsche. That's another thing that we, looking back in the rearview mirror, we know that the values have gone up, and it's become very desirable on many levels to be involved with the Porsche brand, air-cooled Porsches, all that stuff. And you were way ahead of that curve, and you came in through. And I don't think I could ask you to say, you can't tell me be in the right place at the right time, because we can't control that, which is why I have this word "and." Because I would like to ask you, we know that timing is important, but what are the other elements that when you find yourself with a doorway that's cracking open in front of you, what can we learn about how you were able to navigate? Because it seemed like a door would crack and you'd go through it, and you seem to have a knack for that. So I'd like for you to see if there's anything that we can learn from you, that when that door appears, what is the mindset that we need to have?
It's a great question. I mean, for me, simply, it boils down to gut feeling. When we bought the building downtown, people said, "You're crazy. Why would you do that?" Well, we were already downtown. We were just renting a warehouse in a building. And it just made sense to invest in ourselves, meaning buy our own building. If we'd listened to other people's advice, we wouldn't have done it. And I think that's the situation that a lot of people stumble on, is they don't have enough self-confidence and self-belief in their own gut feeling that they're going to be able to jump off that without a safety net and land okay. Some people need a comfort zone. And you got to remember back to me being this kid who's more street smart than book smart. So I don't really look at numbers, for better or worse. Does it feel right? Timing is important, but you can't script time. But if it feels right, you don't question, or I don't question, how is this going to be in 5, 10, 20 years? It's like people that don't want to put miles on a car because they don't want to devalue it, right? They're coming at it from a whole different mentality. So I think the answer to your question, if I want to simple it down, is I was never afraid of failure because I didn't really have too much to lose. And I wasn't locked into boundaries because I didn't really know the rules of how things should work. Investment plan, investors, like I've never had that. You know, it was always little steps, gradually building on my own, not having to answer to other people who had a little piece of what I was doing, who might control those strings and might say, nah, that's not a good idea right now. I just kind of jumped right in and figured, fuck, how bad can it be? I'll find a way, which maybe there's a teachable element there. It's like a couple of things that I want to point out is sort of, to me, this film 2012 led to a TED Talk 2014, led to a book 2017, led to, you know, something else I brought out, this Nike shoe, you know, which was based on a little hand drawing here that all happened very, very organically. None of this was ever planned. They just evolved. So the other question is, this all sort of came to me. What I'm asking myself now is, how do I get the things that aren't just coming to me, but the things that I actually want to do? You know, like that collab I want to do with IKEA or Swatch or whatever it is, right? You know, those guys are not actually knocking on my door. So how do I make that timing work in the situation for me? But to answer your question of air-cooled cars, it was just things I liked when no one else liked them. Like I liked heavy metal music when maybe less people liked it or whatever. So it's just personal preference, maybe going back to that lone wolf thing of not necessarily having to fit into a team, a posse, a clique, a crew you're going to roll with that all has to be in sync, right? You know, warriors come out to play or whatever it is, right? You know, I'm kind of just navigating my own path. So that way I don't really have to answer to anyone for better or worse. And most of the times the decisions I've made have sort of worked out pretty good. So go with your gut feeling.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. This is going to end my time with you.
Is that it? That went pretty quick. That was 45 fast minutes.
Andrew's going to jump in, and we're going to continue telling your story with the cars, but I'm going to hand over to Andrew now.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's it for me, so thank you.
Thanks, Rod. Big round of applause for Rod. You guys enjoying the show so far?
Dude.
Alrighty, part two.
I love how prepared you came. Like, this is so rad. I'm like looking from that side.
There were a few other things in here we didn't even get to. But
I was straight up wondering. I was like, how much is in the bag? What? You brought a shoe?
There's some Nike drawings and there's some other doodlings. Well, probably what's going to be relevant for you will be the car doodlings over here.
Yeah, and I think as I'm looking at those are really easy for me to see because I'm like a foot away from them, but maybe after the night, after we finish these, we could leave them up for a second. People can come take a look and understand it a little bit better. This part of night school is probably my favorite part.
Is that because Rod's not here?
No, it's cool. Like, I love the co-host thing because I'm sitting there and I'm just locked in. I'm just listening to your story. There's so many things. It's like, it's easier to be present. When you're up here, you're like doing a thing. What I like to do, though, is this little field trip, is you brought 3 really important cars here. And it's not all that often that you get to have a talk like this in a space like this where it's like, you know, we're talking about Urban Outlaw, we're talking about these cars. Well, shoot, we can go look at them. And I think that these cars, all 3 of these cars that you brought, actually 4, because the 991 is out front, and that's a cool little moment, too.
That's a whole nother 200,000-mile story out there.
That really is. But it's going through these cars, and it's telling stories around them, and I think that they're so important to your story. So if y'all are down for a little field trip, I think it's field trip, go look at cars moment. Y'all down? Yeah.
Let's get so right. This is the second Porsche I ever bought. I bought this at the Pomona Swap Meet. Yet again, another Pomona Swap Meet find. You guys go to Pomona Swap Meet?
I finally went.
You finally went?
I finally went. It's cool.
Did you buy anything?
Not really, no. I just looked around. There wasn't any good Porsches at the time.
Yeah, there's no Porsches there anymore. But 25 years ago, there were a lot of Porsches before people started putting them online. So this was the second 911 I ever bought. I bought it at the Pomona Swap Meet in 1999. It is a 1971 911T.
Yep.
Ironically, when I acquired it, it had a 2.7 CIS motor in it. So it had already been modified.
Yeah.
I paid $7,500 for it, and then within the first couple of months, I found a pair of real RS flares, had someone weld those on, taken off the steel bumpers, put on some fiberglass bumpers. Back then, it had a ducktail, and I was building what everyone else built at the time, a 73 RS Carrera look-alike based around this car.
So this car has had different iterations.
Yeah. I mean, originally this car is gold. It's been painted green. It's been painted lots of different shades of white. So when I got it, it was white. I made it into a 73 Carrera look-alike. And then I joined the Porsche Owners Club right here in 2002 and went to Willow Springs for the first time.
In Urban Outlaw, the lock-off shot, I just look at POC and like I see that in it, and I think about that, your story. I'm like, all right, there it is.
POC is Porsche Owners Club. There's the PCA, which is the Porsche Club of America, 2 slightly different types of things. The POC did a lot more racing. The PCA was those guys with the name tags doing wine and cheese things.
Dude, you explaining that up there, I was actually laughing. I was like, that's awesome. You nailed it.
So,
my question with this car is, you have 3 really important cars to your story. I think about like playlists and music and where I was and like where that brings me back to. You bought this car in 1999. This car has been with you for so long.
It's been with me for 26 years and the car is 54 years old. So by my math, I've owned it for half of its life.
That's crazy. But I wonder, like, can you take me back to the first year or two, like 1999, 2000, like, what is your life? Paint a picture of a day in the life, ripping this car, like early days. What are you doing?
This era is the Hollywood rock and roll, Alice Cooper, retail store, wholesaling Hot Topic, got the other cars, not just the Porsche. This is the era of the Super Bees, going to Ozfest, going out to a lot of rock and roll shows.
So sick.
That is that era. Then I joined the Porsche Owners Club in 2002, and the car starts its evolution of doing those 30, 40 track days.
So this is like your track day, like this is the car you're out there with?
Yeah, this was the streetable track car, meaning, I never trailered it anywhere. I drive it to Willow Springs and back, Laguna Seca and back. It did get trailered to Las Vegas Motor Speedway in Phoenix, but it was a streetable track car. It is a streetable track car in the sense of drive to the track, do a track day, drive it back.
Yeah.
As opposed to a full-blown race car that has to be trailered.
Yeah.
This is still streetable. It helps that it's a 71, meaning it's pre-smog.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I don't have to worry about smog. There are no real creature comforts. You wind the windows down if you want AC.
Totally.
There's no stereo in it. It's got, headers and currently running a 2.8 twin plug motor. And that was where I did all my club day racing in that car.
So this is you, like you're having success with serious clothing. You're ripping around Sunset Boulevard, going to rock shows, taking it to the track. Like that sounds dope.
Yeah, and having a little bit of extra sex on the track. So that was the first evolution of this car.
Yeah.
The second wave, really, I got to throw some props to Rod because Urban Outlaw comes out 2012, 2013. Speed Hunters is coming around. 2014, EA's coming around. They want me to be in this thing called Need for Speed.
Yeah.
In 2013, I do one of my favorite films called Midnight Rambler after Urban Outlaw, where I'm racing this car around downtown LA.
Yeah.
I didn't realize at the time that was the catalyst for the 2015 Need for Speed video game.
Whoa.
And to tell that story, the guys from EA who are based out in Sweden, right, Rod? I think they're out in Sweden somewhere. They approach me, say, hey, we'd love to have you in the Need for Speed game. And I go, I don't play video games. I don't get it.
Yeah.
So thanks, but no thanks. Then they send the main designer of the game, some dude called Marcus from Sweden, to come and visit me. And I tell him the same thing. So I've turned them down twice. And I don't realize they're basing the game around this video. They didn't actually tell me that.
Oh,
they said, we really want you to be part of it. But they don't tell me why they want me to be part of it. So here's the Need for Speed pivotal story that I love to tell. Late 2014, at my place downtown, I hear a knock on the door one morning. And I go out there, and it's literally Ken Block. And he's outside. And Ken goes to me, I hear we're going to be in Need for Speed. And I go, did they just send you? He goes, no. I go, what are you doing in downtown? He goes, oh, we just shot Gymkhana 5. We're shooting some promo shit.
Casual.
It was all shot around my warehouse. So he comes in and I tell him the story. I go, hey, I just turned down Need for Speed. And then the light bulb clicked and I went, hey, if this is good enough for Ken Block, why is it not good enough for me? And I said, fuck it, I don't need to play the game to be in the game.
Yeah.
And then the crazy part of that story is the game's set in LA, but everyone flew to London and we shot it in London.
Yeah.
And still to this day, 10 years later, people come up to me and they're either beat me in the game or they can't beat me in the game or they love playing me in the game.
Yeah.
So that is the Need for Speed.
That's this car.
That's
like it's this evolution.
Car. But
All
this
right.
car continues. In 2016, these Mattel guys come knocking on my door called Hot Wheels and say, hey, we want to work together. And 8 years later, I've done over 30 Hot Wheels and over 20 million cars.
Yeah.
But there's 8 different variations of the 277 Hot Wheels. Literally
God,
8.
crazy.
There's 3 original body, 3 slant nose bodies,
Wow.
red hood, blue
Wow.
hood, Zimac, silver paint.
Yeah.
There's a bus and there's a 997.
Yeah. And it's also the shoe.
Well, I'm going to get to that. Then this car ended up in the CSR racing video.
Yeah.
And then, yes, there's a Nike shoe that came out in 2021.
Yeah.
So that's the evolution of something that became a relatable car that was built with a purpose of being a streetable track car, wasn't a high dollar full build. And I think that's a relatability that goes beyond Porsche people.
Yeah.
And it ties into the ethos of true gearheads, whether you drive a sport import tuner, whether you're into Fast and Furious, drift, grid life, wheel to wheel, whatever it is, right? Everyone here is a
relatable.
true car guy that
Yeah.
it's the thrill of the chase, the build, the drive, and then the community.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the relatability of this car, whether you're a Porsche guy or not.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And it's like, it's, for better or worse, it's like, it's so much the Magnus car. Like, it is so much, like, you just see this car and you know.
This is the car I'm most associated with. You know, before I had the Nike shoe, I used to describe it as my favorite pair of old shoes. And it's kind of ironic that I didn't call Nike. Nike called me and said, essentially, hey, how do you feel about doing a skate shoe with our pro skater Rashad? I go, sounds great, but I got to tell you, I don't skate. A bit like Need for Speed.
Yeah.
But he said, we don't care. We like your ethos. Rashad's a Porsche guy. We think you'll get along. And that was it.
Sure enough.
Couldn't have scripted that.
Incredible. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I'm going to grab a water, but let's move on.
All right.
Okay, the 964.
So the 964, this car is interesting to me. The one thing that I learned was it's kind of a flex to have Alchemy Paint do this. Nico Ornamental Conifer came to me today and he's like, you know who that is, right? And I was like, nah. He's like, he's painted art. Like, he doesn't paint cars.
Well, interesting story. Matt Bound was Alchemy Paint. He approached me maybe 2014. This period, post-Urban Outlaw 2012 through, let's call it COVID, there's a lot of whirlwind tornado stuff going around. And Matt Bound, an English dude, was in Signal Hill at the time, approached me saying, hey, let's work together.
Yeah.
Long story short, he ended up painting this car. He ended up moving from Signal Hill to my chop shop that I had on my street, Willow, where I basically gave him free rent and he painted cars and we worked together. So he originally painted the 67 SRT and various other things, the GT3, but he painted this car in 2015. So
Wow.
This is a 1990 964 that I sort of bought as a former streetable track car that wasn't doing too well, ironically, from Dorian Alpha, if you know him, at the LA Lit Meet in February of 2015. And then I debuted this car at the LA Auto Show in November of that same year. So this
No way.
This build started in March and debuted at the LA Auto Show in the Pirelli booth in 2015.
Wow.
So the 964 is significant because in a sea of, call it updated, backdated, wide-bodied, Singer, RWB platform, my goal was not to backdate the car, as great as those cars are, but to keep all the 964 DNA intact, but actually change everything about the car.
Yeah.
There's elements of 356, Roof Yellowbird, Sport Classic, and this is my most performance-orientated build to date. Remember, this is 10 years old.
Yeah.
Rod Emery and I collaborated on the louvered fenders. We channeled the hood, channeled the roof, did rain gutter delete. It's rolling on my Outlaw wheels. It was a collab with 1552 on Brembo Club Race brakes with KW coilover suspension and a BBI built 3.8 RS spec motor that's out of a 993.
I think my favorite part here is like, I love like a less is more. I love understated. I love that like the car can rip, but it's just clean, simple. I love that you did this because I think if you don't know you, if you just see 277, you're like, oh, that's the guy that does all the different colors and all that. And I'm like, damn, you get it. Like, you can do both. Like, you fully understand.
Yeah, I love these, what I will call boy racer inspired color block liveries that I've done a lot of. 277's one, the SC, and lots of cars like that. This is Outlaw Slate Gray, and the reason it's Slate Gray and red is I had a 64 911.
Yep.
64 is the birthplace of the 911. Porsche only made 232 of them. It's an extremely rare car.
Yeah.
My 64 911 was slate gray with red interior.
Sick.
So the goal here was not to have a car that looked like a race car. For example, the stripe is in the metal. It's the channeled roof down a 12-inch, the hood, and into the tail. That saved me having to color block it.
Right.
So the goal here was to build something that was kind of understated, more of a gentleman's vibe race car, but was really pretty aggressive. This car weighs 2,560 pounds. It's got a great power to weight ratio. And it's pretty unique in a sea of 964s. That is the original bumper. Those are the original rockers. But everything else is pretty highly modified, but none of it's carbon. And this build is 10 years old and still kind of stands out in a sea of great builds.
Yeah, it's so timeless. It's so good. All right, let's head over to the Carrera GT.
Okay, let's do that.
There's this moment where you kind of share with us something a little bit vulnerable, if I'm being honest. And you're talking about like kind of where you are in your life right now. Like you came from this world, you had all this success in fashion, you had all this success in real estate and music video and film locations. You do Need for Speed, you do the film. You're kind of at this spot of like reinventing yourself, and like this whole story that you share of like trust your gut kind of to me feels like you're at a spot right now where like you're thinking about what you want to trust your gut in. You're thinking about like what this next chapter might be. And you say this little nugget to me. You're like, yeah, I thought this car was done. Like I painted it, didn't really think too much of it. But then just last week I started taping it and I found myself getting really inspired and thinking about what a livery could be. And I was like, hold up, what did you just say? And I think that more than any of the tape lines, which is really cool to learn your process of how you do that, but more than the tape lines, more than the color, more than anything that this will become, I'm curious because it sounds like this is kind of your way of finding your inspiration again. And I think it represents a new chapter for you. Please tell me about that.
Porsche built 406 of these cars, and they only painted them black, red, or silver. And I wasn't actively looking for a pretty rare Porsche. And I got an email in 2014, 2015, this magic period, from some guy in Australia who essentially said, I have a car you should own. And I go, what is it? And he said, 924 Carrera GT. And this car's got this little badge here, which turns out it was impounded somewhere in Japan and actually ended up in a police impound tow yard in Japan and then got exported to Australia right here. This guy couldn't sell the car in Australia because it's not right-hand drive.
Is this not just a sticker? Who could you just take it off?
Not a sticker. This car got impounded. It's a Japanese impound tow yard thing. So anyway, this car ended up becoming a deal because the guy couldn't sell it in Australia. I shipped it halfway around the world. And then my buddy Matt Bown at Alchemy Paint painted it in 2015, 2016. And by that I mean he just painted the bottom Minerva blue with a slate gray pinstripe, which are two of my favorite Porsche colors. And then of course we slammed it on the Outlaw wheels at a 16-inch. And that was it. I never actually clicked with this car. I didn't really drive it much. It sat inside my space for quite some time. It only came out for the Peterson exhibition I did a couple of years ago for the Euro 10 anniversary. But like you said, a couple of weeks ago, I got out some orange tape that's right there, and I just did 3 little stripes because I was bored, sat looking at my desk. And I went, wow, that looks pretty cool. And those 3 stripes led to this quarter panel. And then I bounced around here to the front fender and added. And this all happened very organically. And whether you like it or not, it's kind of irrelevant because all it really did for me was sort of ignite a spark of creativity that I feel I'd sort of been lacking because I'm in my vintage Rolls-Royce era, and I'm not playing around with these things called Porsches because, you know, people used to say to me, hey, aren't you Rob Zombie? And then this film Urban Outlaw came out, and then nobody stopped, you know, everyone stopped saying, hey, aren't you Rob Zombie?
But you know him, right? That's my favorite part.
Yeah, I know him.
That's great.
I'm like his bigger brother, Bob Zombie.
I
Rob's
need the photo of you two together.
Bob Zombie! So anyway, the film comes out, and then people come up to me, hey, aren't you that Porsche guy? And yeah, I am, but then it became kind of annoying, and then I decided maybe I don't like them quite as much as I did and started getting into vintage Rolls Royces, but that's another story. So this kind of just sparked a little bit of creative juice for me to re-inspire myself on something that I have actually loved for 48 years. I'm 58 years old. I fell in love with Porsche when I was 10. So this car for me, the way I create is, I always say the idea is the most important thing and the idea is not teachable. You can go to school and learn how to illustrate and apply this technique, whether it's computer-aided design or AI or you're great at illustrating. For me, I'm only in this car a couple of hours. So within 20, 30 minutes, I'm either vibing on it or I'm not. But I actually haven't taken any tape off this car and gone, oh, I don't like the way it looks. I just keep adding and adding. Now, whether this car actually gets painted is sort of irrelevant because it achieved a goal that I didn't set. I just put 4 pieces of this orange tape right here on the car. And then I got this Home Depot blue painter's tape because we all love that, right? And that was it. I just added stuff to it. But it's done one thing I thought wasn't even aware of it doing. It sort of sparked my creativity to get back into doing what I think is fun stuff for me with Porsches.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it did way more than I thought it could. Now, this is a 924 Carrera GT, but the internal number is 937. So I just made these numbers myself. You know, it'd be cool if I had someone who was a graphic guy, if anyone knows anyone who wants to come and help me actually do this on a computer in like 5 seconds, as opposed to me cutting out numbers in 5 minutes, because now I'm thinking this should be bigger and bleed over, but yeah, that means I've got to go cut a bigger number. Well, so I'm kind of limited, but I'm playing around and having fun, so that's kind of it.
Two things there. One, I heard a story about you, like, not that long ago, where they were like, oh, he doesn't have a computer. Is that true?
No, well, yes and no. I mean, I have an old PC that's got a whole bunch of shit on it that I'm trying to get off it, that's got an operating system that's obsolete and I can't turn it on.
That's amazing.
So that's an old PC. Maybe 8 years ago, I did buy a laptop, but I never travel with it. Seldom do I turn it on. So I have a computer, but I don't really know how to use it.
The reason for asking is, like, I love that that doesn't stop you. That, like, you literally cut out a number. You take painter's tape, but you're finding inspiration, you're creating. I think that that's encouraging for artists who feel like they can't get started.
Sure, I mean, because visually it's great that you can look at a 3D rendering or AI and spin it around right, but if you've got the actual object life size and an hour of your time and some tape and a vision, you can sort of get quite a long way down the road of inspiration. And that is all this is for me. It's a design study that I didn't even know I needed in inspiration, and it's motivated me to sort of, I'm not going to say fall back in love with something, because I never really fell out of love with it, but you know, it's kind of like when everyone starts wearing a Nirvana t-shirt and you can buy them at Walmart and you go, oh, it's not quite as cool as it was
I don't know. Yeah, you're like, I don't know. Also, I don't know if any of the designers out there heard that, but if y'all are looking for a way to impress our guy here, I think you should render this car. Just saying.
Render this car. Just needs a few colors.
I love that. Like, to me, I'm genuinely curious, and this might lead back to like walking over there and doing the Q&A. But just that idea of, like, man, you could look at you and be like, this guy made it. Like, this guy's it. He's had the film, he's had the video game, he's had the shoe, the this, the that. You did the TED Talk. Yet it really feels like you're at a spot right now in your life where you're like, where is my inspiration? What do I want to do? What's next?
I mean, inspiration's not like a light switch where you turn it on. You know, it sort of either comes or it doesn't. And so it's like writer's block, you know, like bands that suffer a follow-up to a debut album that was great, right? I mean, you know, I'm in that spot right now of not necessarily feeling super creative, super inspired. I'm having a lot of meetings and talks that are going nowhere, and I'm like, fuck, back to Serious Clothing days, that was all pretty easy. Because back then someone said they were going to do something and they did it. They didn't pull out the phone and look at the calendar and then flake on you and, you know, things just drag on. People were sort of more, it was easier for me back then. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and approaching 60 and life's a bit different. I don't know, but these times when I'm just not inspired, and I'm in that phase right now. Everything we talked about had been this great, wow, your timing's fucking great always, but I'm in this point right now where I'm kind of off sync. I'm off time.
I love that you share that.
My frequency is not like home run, home run, home run. I'm not, you know, having these big home run things that just organically fall into place. And it's like you can fight it, but maybe it's just a matter of, okay, I got to tread water and wait for the time to swing back my way. You know, so this is the first time in my life, being in LA for 40 years, where I'm like, wow, I never thought about timing other than I kind of organically had it at the right time, and now maybe what I'm doing is not the time right now. And what do I do? Well, I put a few pieces of tape on the car and felt a little bit better about myself, so that's what I did.
I love that you share that. Was there a clap? I feel like I started to hear somebody clap. I'll give a clap to that.
Thank you very much.
I love that you share that, because I think it's so often that people you talk to, they just put up that, like, oh, I've got it all figured out, I'm the shit, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, it makes your story feel that much more real to me, that you're like, oh no, like there's times where like it doesn't just flow.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is you got to keep moving forward. You know, the hustle, you got to keep grinding away, right? I mean, that's just sort of it, sink or swim. And, you know, I'm treading more water now than I've tread in the past. And, you know, it's thicker water that I'm treading in, but yet I'm still moving forward.
Well, that's the point. I love that you just started a thing. It's not like you're sitting there and you're like, oh, poor old me. You're just like, all right, cool. find some creativity.
Yeah,
start
and that was
messing around
why
with
we
tape.
brought this car, because originally we were going to bring the 67 or the 914. I go, well, you kind of said it too. It's like, no, there's something here, regardless of whether you like the layout, the livery, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of secondary and irrelevant.
Exactly.
Because this ignited in something in me that I didn't realize really needed to ignite. And I think deep down I did, but this was the catalyst, the spark, and it just flowed natural.
I love that you
So
shared
if you got an
that.
idea, just get out some tape and do it. That's the moral to that story.
Done. I love that, and thank you. And I think that car now, like this one, is so special to me for that. I love a clap.
Well, I guess that's a wrap. I guess that's a wrap. That guy's saying, wrap it up.
That's let's go back up there. We'll do a small Q&A. All right, I see you back there.
So you've obviously been collecting things for quite a long time. Is there an item in your collection that has like your favorite story that was like the most difficult to get or that was super hard to find, something like that?
Well, I think if there's one, it's 277. You know, it wasn't necessarily the hardest one to get, but it's the one I've owned the longest and the most significant one. Ironically, the 64 911 that inspired that car was probably the hardest one. And that was a car that I actually owned and never did anything to. It was a restoration project that I never started. And then I let it go because it sort of shifted its meaning. It was something that was like a holy grail. I had to have the first 911, the first year, the this, the that. And then when I got it, I'm like, what's the point? So I don't know if that really answers your question, but the 64 911 was a hard chase in a car that I never did anything with, never restored it, and then sold it. Ironically, I made a shitload of money on it, though, so.
It was worth something then.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Rome from Analog and Grid here in San Diego.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for hanging.
Two-part questions.
Okay.
You talked about that gut feeling, right? Yeah. How do you know when to walk away from an idea or project that isn't working and when to be more relentless and persistent about that idea?
Dope question.
That's actually a great question because I'm in that phase right now. You know, this building that I've owned in downtown LA, I've owned it for 25 years, and I've decided it's time to let this building go. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to move on, and this is the catalyst to change. And this is a great story on my timing being bad. Everything else, my timing is this home run thing. Well, we listed this building last year, and the whole world has changed in the past year, and my timing on this building is bad, and I'm got to the point where I'm just frustrated at people sort of telling me the same negative reason why no one's interested in this pretty unique space that I've built over 25 years. And other than 277 that I've owned 26 years, I've never owned anything that long. And it's this emotional thing of everything we've talked about is tied up in that building. And it's the next chapter of my life, and I'm going to let it go. But yet no one wants it. So I finally decided, okay, I'm taking the listing away. I'm sort of letting time move on, and I'm letting myself not get frustrated by getting sucked into this negativity of, hey, why, what can we do? The building's never been as good as it is, but yet the time is wrong. So I literally said, hey, I'm going to wait and see, and it's no longer available. And part of me really needs emotionally to get rid of it, and financially it'd be great to get rid of it. But I'm in a position now that I've never been in before. But I made that choice a couple of weeks ago to say, hey, I'm done with it, or done with the listing part, and let's see what happens in 2026. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of right where I'm at with that. What was the second part of your question? You had two parts to your question, right?
Oh, the mic. Oh, God. He's looking
I could
around.
probably hear you from 8 feet away. But.
My second question is, you often describe driving as like therapy, right? What non-automotive activities do you do to use to relax, to unwind, to focus, to meditate, to recenter yourself?
Well, my last name's Walker, and I average over 12,000 steps a day. And myself and my wife, who sat right behind you, Hannah, and our dog Willow, we walk a lot. So, I'm walking all the time because to me, I'm a car guy, driving's awesome. But you see things when you're walking that you don't see when you're driving. And whether it's picking flowers for my hat or getting inspired by a billboard or a color or a texture or an environment, that's best seen on foot. So for me, walking is relaxing. I'm that guy that I only have one car that gets serviced at the dealer. It's that 991 Turbo S outside. It's got 199,950 miles on it right now, and I'm going to 200,000, but I'm trying to restrict the mileage because I want to film it when it gets to 200,000. So, moral to my story on walking. I dropped that at the Porsche dealer, downtown LA Porsche, a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Do you want to ride back to your warehouse in the Arts District? It's 3.5 miles." I go, "No, I love walking." So I will always walk from downtown LA Porsche, past the Staples Center, all the way through downtown to the Arts District. And I do it, one, for exercise, and two, just to see the state of what is happening on the street in downtown LA. You know, you walk up Figueroa, you go through the box, you go through Skid Row, and then you come out the other side at the Arts District. And I see what is going on with my own eyes on the street, and I see it getting worse. Now, driving around, I might not have seen that. So that's not necessarily relaxing, but yeah, that's how I'm sort of aware of what's going on in the environment, doing it on foot. So thanks for the questions.
Nice.
Great questions.
Back there, I saw that one. You were number one.
So I know you live downtown. Your driving footage is amazing. Some of the best stuff out there. I'm curious, how do you pick the roads that you're going to choose to drive on, especially ones farther away? I know there's some Malibu footage. It's gorgeous stuff.
It also depends on the experience and what we're doing. Here's another great driving example that Hannah, my wife, who sat in front of you, did last week with our dog Willow. Everything's around Hannah and Willow. That's my life. So Hannah's mum turned 70, and they live in Denver. Well, they live in Parker, which is a division of Denver. And we could have flown to Denver, but yeah, we wanted to take Willow. So we drove to Denver in that 991 Turbo S, and Denver's 1,061 miles from where we live. 5 states, 4 tanks of gas, and we did it in under 15 hours. So that was all part of an adventurous road trip. So that's one example. Another example is nighttime driving around LA's kind of scenic. It's like being in your own film, whether it's downtown or going down to San Pedro and doing the bridges and the 110. It feels to me like you're in Blade Runner. You know, I like watching films, and a lot of these nighttime driving things, the shit just looks good at night. So I like driving around at night, and there's this magic hour, usually between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., where you can kind of rip around and, for the most part, sort of do what you want to do. So there's stuff like that. And then, you know, obviously driving up Angeles Crest Highway, no longer on a Friday, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's a world-class road. You know, the greatest thing about where we live in LA is Ocean Desert Mountain. And I've done that in the morning. Santa Monica, Palm Springs, Big Bear, Ocean Desert Mountain, right? A lot of us have had the opportunity to travel around the world, and you go to places that may have one of those three. Switzerland's got a lot of great mountains, but there's no desert, there's no ocean there, right? So we're kind of spoiled in the sense of whether it's a rip up the 110 to Pasadena from downtown, which is really hard to beat, or it's a full tilt boogie up the crest, or drive to Denver in a day in a car. There's a lot of great drives around, so hopefully that answers your question there.
Love that.
I like the no, not on Fridays. We're laughing at that one.
Yeah, subtle.
So you were talking about your intuition, your gut feeling. Obviously, you just following in what you've been talking about has really produced some great things. But I'm curious, is there a time that it led you astray, or that you didn't listen to it and wish you had?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in that right now in the sense of letting this thing go, this building, right? I'd been thinking about letting it go for 5 years, and I didn't react quick enough to the change in environment. It was something I didn't see. My crystal ball, I had a crystal ball that always said 2020, I would be out of that building. It would be worth all the money in the world. I'd go into semi-retirement, go buy this fixer-upper chateau in France or wherever, and, you know, start restoring an old chateau that I'd found on, you know, Instagram or something. But I didn't move. I wasn't able to let it go in the time frame upon reflection that would have been a better time to let it go. So it just took me longer because of all the emotional baggage that I've dealt with in that building and the history and everything I've gone through to decide, hey, can I exist without it? It's like the biggest decision that I've made in my life. And maybe the timing isn't right, or maybe I'm just at the wrong time, and maybe it's going to be a blessing in disguise where something else drops in that I don't see right now and go, fuck, it was good that I didn't do it at that time, right? So I don't have a clear vision. That's not really a straight answer to it, but it's kind of where I'm at right now in the sense of maybe I should have let it go before, but I didn't because I wasn't ready.
I'm going to tack on to that, though, because you've experienced so much success and trusting your gut. Now, in a moment of more uncertainty, are you more comfortable sitting with the like, oh, maybe it's just not that time?
Yes and no, because, my background was filming. So everything I've talked about with cars has not really been a money-making thing. It's a hobby. It's not a business, right? That's kind of what separates me from the Singers and Gunthers and Tuttles and Roofs and all these people that do great stuff. I'm not actually selling these cars. My money came from film location business, owning property that I rented out to buildings for commercial filming, TV shows, music video, reality shows. And as I'm sure a lot of people here work in the Hollywood entertainment film industry, it's down. So an example would be, I don't generate income from the car stuff. I don't even monetize my YouTube channel. I'm that guy that never even turned that button on to monetize YouTube channel. People go, stupid, why don't you do that? Well, I never wanted to monetize the hobby. That way, to me, it was never selling out because I had the financial security from everything else we talked about. So I had this cushion that allowed me to sort of do shit for free, right? Go everywhere for free and never charge money or whatever it was. It's like this Robin Hood giving stuff away.
Sick.
But my main source of income is this film revenue where I'd gone from, let's say, 100 days a year to maybe 1 day a month. So I'm like 90% down on income, which is like,
wow.
5 years later, I'm like bleeding dry. I go, well, how am I going to get the film business back, right? They've all run overseas and they're filming in other countries or they're filming in New Mexico or Atlanta or Toronto or AI, or it's just a change in industry. And how am I adapting?
Yeah.
So now for the first time, there's actually a financial element of, well, I'm not going to get a job because I've never had that.
Yeah.
And everything I had before came pretty easy and successful. So now really is the time for me to almost hit rock bottom and go, okay, fuck, now I got to sink or swim, right? And really come back and figure out, okay, am I getting back into the clothing business because I actually like that?
Yeah.
Am I doing something else that's in this art space of creativity, of design? Or, I have a lot of conversations with people that sound great.
Yeah.
Design-related collabs. I mean, Nike opened the door to a lot of conversations. So did Hot Wheels. They haven't necessarily panned out yet. So for me, it's just a matter of, yet again, okay, I'm not back to where I was, but there's a sense of vibe of, fuck, yeah, I'm kind of struggling here, whether it's creatively or financially, in a sense of things that came really easy before. That environment has changed for a lot of different reasons.
But my point is, when you went from serious to film location rentals, like that wasn't a plan, right? That was just these moments aligning.
That's purely organic. Like, we got in the film business because there was an article in the LA Times that came out September, right after 9/11 in 2001, about adaptive reuse of former industrial buildings. I wasn't smart enough to buy a building and go, let's get in the film location business. I actually tried that after and it didn't work. I had one building that was doing 100 days a year, and I found this old Mason's Lodge in East LA that was even cooler than my building in downtown. And it was built in 1925. It was like an old theater. I thought, fuck, this will be great for filming. So I bought a building for filming. And then no one wanted to go to East LA to film because it was kind of sketchy.
Wow.
So that was an example of, well, that didn't work out for filming. But then ironically, the neighborhood got slightly gentrified and I sold the building for a profit.
Well, that's my point right now, is like,
So,
it's just interesting that you're in that spot where like you've had these uncertain moments, but it's always worked out. So like, I wonder, like, do you go to bed at night still just being like, yeah, we'll be good?
I think this moment's going to work out. It's just taking longer to work out.
Yeah.
That's a long answer to your question. I don't even know if it answers it, but I'm just a rambling man.
Nice.